Was a big weekend in New Hampshire, and as things start to ramp up there, they get a lot of clicks over at New Hampshire Union Leader, as it is sort of the paper of record, and a lot of those clicks go to Drew Cline, who covers the presidential campaign and the primaries in the Granite State. He joins us now.
If you want to follow him, his Twitter handle is Drew Hampshire.
Oh,
see what he did there? It's like he's in New Hampshire, but he goes by Drew Hampshire.
Drew, you're not planning on moving anytime soon, huh?
Well, I'm from North Carolina, and when I did that Twitter handle, a lot of my friends teased me for not coming up with Drew NC.
Right.
Which, if I move back, I guess I'll have to switch it.
All right. Well, we hear that Hillary Clinton is heading up there now, but there were 20 candidates or potential candidates up there this weekend. Tell me why this weekend of all weekends?
Well, this weekend just happened to be the weekend that the Republican Party of New Hampshire planned an event. And this is actually a major event. There has not been an event like this in New Hampshire for the Republican Party ever. So in New Hampshire, the candidates come up sort of on their own schedules, and they go their own tours. And this time the Republican Party decided to put on what's called a cattle call, right, where they had one event, and they invited all the candidates to it. And they had a hotel, and you would have to, it was sort of a party fundraiser. You'd pay $100 to get in, and you could hear all these candidates. And they all said yes. Just about all of them said. There were a couple who weren't here. So, we had something like 19 candidates up, and still Rick Santorum wasn't here. There were a couple of potentials who didn't show up. So it was a major event because it was unusual in New Hampshire that you could go to one place and hear multiple candidates.
Now, you get some sense of how their message is resonating with the Republicans after they give a little speech or after they interact with them. So, from your perspective, who did the New Hampshireites like?
Well, we call ourselves Granite Staters.
Okay, Granite Staters. Who did they like?
Well, Rubio, Walker were clear. I don't know that I'd say favorites, but they got a lot of applause. Ted Cruz got a ton of applause. His message went over really well. Ted Cruz worked the crowd like a Southern Baptist preacher. It was, I am not kidding. Lots of people afterwards said, my God, that was felt like being in a tent revival. And he got a great reaction. I think almost every candidate got a standing ovation. They all were on message. They all got good responses from the crowd. Bobby Jindal got really good responses. Carly Fiorina did. So you have to sort of take into account that this crowd is maybe a little bit different than your average primary voter. These are Republican activist types who are willing to pay money to come here and speak. So it's not necessarily representative of the rest of the voting electorate who's going to vote in the primary.
We've been told that Chris Christie has been spending a lot of time up there. I don't think he's been to Iowa in months. What was the reception for Christie like, and is this his strategy? Is it all about New Hampshire for him?
It's all about New Hampshire for Christie. He's not going to do well in Iowa, so he has to put all his eggs in New Hampshire. There's no other option for him. And he got very warm responses. He came up for a town hall meeting in Londonderry last week, and then he came up for this event, and both times the Republicans in New Hampshire are pretty skeptical of Christie. They kind of view him as too moderate for their taste, but they're open, right? They want to go see everybody. And the reactions I got from people who saw him both times were, you know what? I'm going to start to listen to this guy. He was really good. And so that's the value of the primary. You get to actually go in and hear these people in person, and they can change your perceptions of them, right? You have a perception that's formed by the media, by the coverage, and it's this sort of national narrative. But then you get to go and see this person speak in person. You get to maybe ask them a question and size them up one-on-one, see how they relate to people and what your comfort level is. When you're in the room with an individual, you get a very different perception than when you read about that person in the newspaper.
Sure.
And Christie is benefiting from that. It's a very good venue for him.
So let me just run through a couple other names you haven't mentioned yet. Carly Fiorina.
Yeah, she did very well. So I think people really should pay attention to Carly Fiorina. When she gets into a crowd of Republicans, she is super smart.
Yeah.
And she impresses people. I have yet to come away from an event with her where the people I talked to afterwards didn't say she. I'm sorry, did say she was impressive. Everybody says, "Wow."
Yeah.
I'm paying attention to her now. She's never held elective office. Could she win the nomination? She's a super long shot, obviously.
Yeah.
But she's impressing people by coming up here and being an impressive candidate.
Now, what about Rick Perry?
Perry is interesting, right? So from what I talked to, the impression that people have so far is similar to what they had last time around. Perry's argument is, look, I was sick, I had back pain, I was on medications, I was not my best self last time around. And people who are going to his events are saying, he's saying all the right things, I like what I hear, but there's this sort of first date impression. Right?
Yeah.
As one Republican told me the other week, if you have a bad first date, you're not going to want to go on a second date.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the impression a lot of Republicans have of Perry. It was a bad first date, and they're not as open to him as I think he thinks they are.
And what about Jeb Bush?
People are open to Bush. People are actually coming out and listening to him. Bush, his persona is, I'm the adult in the room. So he gives this very measured, very explanatory presentation. He doesn't fire people up. Nobody's getting excited about Jeb Bush. And that can help him. I mean, that was sort of Romney's MO. He was the sort of adult in the room last time around. But the problem with Bush is you have many more credible candidates now, challengers that Romney didn't have, that people view as A, extremely credible, B, inspiring. So when you get Bush and Rubio and Walker and Cruz and Jindal, for example, in the room, these other guys are much more inspiring than Bush is, and you come away with an emotional response. Whereas with Bush, I haven't talked to anybody who really comes away with that kind of emotional connection. They say, well, he's reasonable. I like him on some things. But, boy, they get fired up by the other guys. So I think that's a problem for Bush going forward.
Let's step away. And our guest is Drew Cline of the New Hampshire Union Leader, talking about this big weekend in New Hampshire in preparation for, I guess, the first primary, which is, 10 months from now or 9 months from now? Let's step away from the personalities and talk about the issues. What are people in the Granite State most concerned about? Is the issue of immigration a problem? Is national security what they're focusing on?
What's interesting is that you hear immigration comes up a lot because people want clarification. So the candidates have all said things on immigration, but when they get to New Hampshire, you'll hear New Hampshire voters ask them details. They want to pin you down on exactly what you mean. Do you mean a pathway to citizenship? And who is that pathway for? Is it for people who are already here or people who are going to come here? So you get a lot of immigration questions with a lot of detail. But people are also very concerned about national security. You get a lot of questions about ISIS and Iran, a lot of questions about Iran. I mean, I think more so than most other elections, that's going to be a major factor in people's minds.
I've heard that, yeah.
We got to roll really fast, though, since Hillary's coming up there. Is New Hampshire going to let her get away with these pre-programmed audio animatronic rehearsed events, or is it going to be more real?
She's going to have to get out of her bubble in New Hampshire.
To get out of the Scooby van, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
We got to leave it there. Thanks for joining us.
All right. My pleasure.